Welcome. My name is Allison Merker Garner, and I am the creator of Musical Minds. And this video goes through Musical Minds Volume 1. So you have some idea of what's in there. Before we get into that, however, I do want to give a little bit of background. Many years ago, 40 years ago, doesn't seem that long, I graduated from college and worked as a professional violinist for a few years, and I felt unfulfilled with that and decided to go back to school. And I got my degree in music education, and I developed my own master's degree with interrelated arts and aesthetics and early childhood education and child development, Del Crow's piano. So it was kind of a potpourri of different approaches and different disciplines. And why I did that was because I envisioned a program, a curriculum that integrated all of the arts to emphasize aesthetics, so that in teaching an instrument to a child, they're beginning away from the instrument and developing a relationship with music first. And this is really critically important because in our culture, we do not have that naturally available to the students that we teach. Many of the students I get do not have music in the home. They don't listen to it. They don't go to concerts. Nobody plays. And even the kids that are enrolled in school already, they're not getting it there as well. They may have a music teacher, but there's none of the singing games and the clapping games and the finger plays and the things that we used to do on the playground, the recess games. And that formed such a very important backdrop to any kind of music learning. The kids are doing things that they do naturally. At very young ages, kids that age, 2 to 5, are needing movement things. They're interested in language because they're still developing it. They're interested in developing themselves, who they are, and having an identity. And they're interested in expressing that and interacting with other children. So all of these things are starting to develop, and the most natural, organic way for children is through the arts. Singing, chanting, moving, gesturing, dramatic play, playing unpitched percussion instruments, creating sounds within their environment. When they're playing with a dump truck and they're making the noises for that dump truck, this is all, it's intuitive for them. And so taking that and making that the basis of a method from which we can grow was my idea. And so Musical Minds started about 40 years ago. I joined a number of preschools, a K through 5 school, and developed it. And so it began as a group program. It began as something that you could do with groups. And about 30 years ago was when I started integrating it into my private studio. So I teach violin and I teach piano. And what I was finding in my studios and with those children was the problems that we still have today. Kids coming unprepared, kids not having practiced, they hadn't done their listening, parents not fully involved or halfway involved, or the nanny brings them and the nanny doesn't practice with them. And a feeling that I'm losing ground, because by being a Suzuki teacher specifically, I didn't feel like I could do my job properly. If the kids weren't listening and practicing and the parents weren't fully involved, my hands were tied. And this was becoming more of a problem rather than less of a problem. And so I felt it needed to be addressed. And so I started experimenting then with Musical Minds within my private teaching studio and doing things with the kids one-on-one that would engage them, that would give them some context for a concept that they were learning, to be able to step back from the music that they were practicing and practice a technique, one finger motion, one bowing in a folk tune that they could do right away. They didn't have to go home and practice it. They learned it right there in lesson and could do it. And using the materials in that way, I found it really compelling, because kids that didn't practice regularly, it's a big jump going into pre-Twinkle to playing through Twinkle. So having a couple of mini steps along the way to prepare for Twinkle ensured that they learned the technique properly, because I was teaching it and I was practicing with them with that. And they already knew the tunes. So the ear training was there. And so we were able to actually progress lesson to lesson. They felt the sense of progress and accomplishment and mastery. So they were encouraged. So Musical Minds started out more as a group thing, and then it kind of expanded to include private teaching. So I've written 4 sets of books, 4 volumes that outline Musical Minds, and 3, well, just 2 actually, 2 ebooks. And I'm going to take each one of those and walk you through them, so you know what's in there and what's the thinking and what's the age level and what's the developmental level and how it could be useful to you. The thing that I love about these books and this method is it's not independent. It can be independent, but it's not necessarily independent of anything else that you're doing. It doesn't have to take the place of whatever you've already established. It can supplement it, it can support it, it can provide a context for it, because it involves, as you will see, as you get more advanced, it involves all the ways of musicking. So if your focus is performance, like mine is, there are elements of Musical Minds that provide children with an easy in to improvisation and composition and being able to arrange something and being able to score read and playing in an ensemble, so that they're contexts from which they can connect and express themselves that enhance what you're doing with them. Right? So this is creating immersion for your students, is creating that immersive environment. And that's what they're not getting somewhere else. And that's what we teachers struggle with, is that the kids we get don't have that. And so we're having to teach them how to think. We're having to teach them how to listen. We're having to teach them how to use their bodies and small motor control and self-control and self-regulation. So let us begin with Musical Minds Volume 1. Musical Minds Volume 1 has 3 elements to it. The first element, and I'm going to screen share so that you can see these. The first element is the book itself, and I will bring this down here so you can see it better. Takes up the whole screen, doesn't it? And then some. There we go. And is also a reading book. So we have a reading book and we have the textbook. And we also have a CD that goes with it, which looks like this and has, I'll read it, 56 songs, clapping games, finger plays, and some movement activities, some Delcros in there that are part of the curriculum. The artist for this is Margaret Scanlon, who is she's a pianist as well, but her specialty is watercolor. So she did a beautiful job of this, and we played in the same Irish band together for 8 years. So this is copyrighted. We won't go through the preface, but this is the table of contents here. The table of contents starts with form, and then moves on to beat and rhythm and meter, pitch, which includes melody, and tempo and dynamics, the expressive qualities, and some appendices. So in the form unit, we start with a story. The story is on your CD. It's an abbreviated version of The Gingerbread Boy. And as you will see, there are pictures for every character, which is a part of the form, that are visible. There's a sign to each. Here's the stop, stop. Here's the stop, stop. It has the same image. So you can see the form. And then on the CD, you also hear the use of the wood block on stop, stop, which a child can do. And they're isolating 2 quarter notes. There's a chance to draw these. So why am I doing this? Why do I have a story? Why have images? Why am I having them play at certain points? The reason is this is how children learn. And you're going to have some children that are more visual. You're going to have fewer that are more oral. That's just our culture. Kids are used to screens. They're not as used to having to listen. So kinesthetic things, you'll have a wide scope of different levels in your class of kids and their ability to control their bodies. So there are opportunities for all of these things to be developed. And what does imagery do? It helps with the imagination. It helps with picturing something, which we musicians have to be able to do. If we're going to pick up a technique and we're going to watch a teacher that's demonstrating that and we pick that up, we have to image that. We have to recreate it in our minds. And we're developing the mind for learning how to play an instrument, not just the ear, because the ear, that's more abstract. And so if we have these other things, it makes the abstraction concrete. They can learn to audiate through this kind of interaction. So we have a poem that's in a form, and we can draw those different parts of the poem. And then we can look and identify the form, AB form, ABC form, ABA form, and so forth. And then you can create your own form. And on these, same thing, we're looking at form still. This is the form section. We're using imagery to do that. We can relate that to the CD, which has examples coming up here of form that are oral. So listening to a poem, listening to a chant, listening to a tune, and being able to still recognize form. So we're doing it visually, and now we're doing it orally. And if you add to that movement, kids really get it. They have it. So this book is very good for pre-twinkle or pre-instrumental kids. And I like to do pre-instrumental so that I get a good idea of being able to assess where kids are and how ready they will be for an instrument and what they can do and what they can't do yet, physically, mentally, emotionally. Helps me a great deal to teach directly to them. And here's some lesson ideas of what you can do with the Suzuki pieces, for example. That would be with form in a group class, in a private lesson. And here are the resources, books that you can use, songs you can use. Most of those are in your CD. Poetry that you can integrate in to what you're doing. So you can use a little bit of your own creativity on this to create something that's meaningful to your students and relevant to what they're learning. So the second unit here is on meter, beat, and rhythm. So we start once again with a story. This is a book that you can use, and I'm sure it's in the library, The Hungry Caterpillar. It's a good one for introducing the idea of quarter note or beat. And then we use these tunes, or not tunes, these chants for the same thing. We're using them for beat. Now, eventually we can use them for more than beat. We can use them for meter, and I have ways of using this, these same examples with meter or with rhythm, which I have written in here as well. So same tune, multiple levels of learning. So you're building, always building on what you already know. You're not learning new tunes for new things, new chants for new things. You just use the ones that you know and you start building on them and making them a little bit more and more challenging, right? And some tunes, we do the same thing. And then we start looking at notation. I start looking at pre-reading really early on. And the reason why is it helps the ear. I didn't do this 30 years ago, but I found now that a lot of children need the aid of something to look at. They're used to that. They're used to sound and sight going together. So we do a little pre-reading stuff. I'm a Suzuki teacher. I don't teach reading formally yet, but we do a little bit of conceptual things and some definitions and what they mean. So if they've been working with a beat, we translate that into a quarter note, and I call those heartbeats. So you have heartbeats here. We haven't organized our heartbeats into a meter yet. We're just changing the language a little bit to be toward rhythm. And here we're organizing to make meter. And these are examples that kids can do or not do. If that's not something you want to get into yet with your children, don't do it. They may not be ready. If they're 2 or 3, they're not going to be ready. But if they're 4, 5, 6, they're just starting to use a pencil and being able to learn how to write. You can perhaps be doing that with them. So this is how I introduce pre-reading and rhythm. And once again, we've got some things that will be on your CD with activities that are suggested for either a group class or a private setting. private lesson setting. And we end with our additional, oh, no, we've got our rhythm cards. So I have flashcards in here, and we have a game, a rhythm game that involves trains. So you have your rhythm cards for that as well. So once we get through that, we've got some new tunes and we're relating it to the instrument now. So if you've got book one kids, this is something that can be related directly to Suzuki pieces that they're learning. Group class ideas and additional materials, and then we're into pitch. So you're starting to see how this is structured. We usually start with something with language, a story, a poem, a chant, something that is, there we go. Here we go. This is beginning the pitch section. So we start with a book. Jump, frog, jump, to do the mi, re, do. If you don't use solfege, that's fine. I find it handy when we get into theory, but that is entirely up to you. And then we have movement games, singing games that involve pitch. And some of these can be transferred to the instrument if you want to do it with your pre-twinkle kids. Pop goes the weasel, you can pluck on the pop. That's just as easy as putting it on a wood block or jumping on the pop. Okay, and so we're placing these notes on a staff so we get some idea of how that looks. And here are our flashcards. I have them for violin, viola, and cello, and piano. So moving on from that, we get into, we're still in piano there. All right. So then we're into intervals. We're learning about intervals. Excuse me. More activities you can do with your CD. If you want to move on to scales, there are a few of the beginning scales in here for the different instruments. Okay. I do start pretty early with triads and scales. With the pianist, I do a 5-note scale with the right away, and with the string players, I do a full scale. It's a group of four notes, so 2 tetrachords put together that have the same finger combination. A1, 2, 3, E1, 2, 3 has the same feel under the hand. So we may just start with a tetrachord and then if you want some reading activities, they're in here. I don't usually do that this early. But if you have an older beginner that may, that's 6, 7, or 8, that may be a very good option for you. Now, about the piano. I am a piano and violin teacher, but I also like to introduce the keyboard to my violin students. I think that's important that they have some idea of how to read it and where the notes are on the keyboard that they play on the violin. I think that keyboard awareness, it may not even be keyboard skills, but just keyboard awareness is very important. And it's also easier to do ear training on the piano. I have kids that will work things out on the piano long before they work them out on the violin. And that's okay. That's okay. It's a good way to go about it. So then we get into some key signatures. Once again, that's for older beginners, not the ones that are, preschool aged. But I wanted to offer things for everyone in here, everyone at this level, and group activities. And then we're back to the last unit goes back to our gingerbread boy story and offers dynamics. First, inflection with the voice and how that can be changed, and how the tempo or the pace of the story can change. And then we go from the word to art to movement to music, so that we have a full embodiment of those concepts, right? More flashcards if you want to use flashcards for tempos, right? Then we have additional materials that you can use. Some are already on the CD, some of them are not, that are easily accessible on the internet. And then the last part is I think there are 4 lesson plans that integrate all the elements: language, music, movement, visuals, imagination, dramatic play, all of that into an activity that teaches a rhythm or an expressive quality or form, or maybe several of those things. All right. So, there are 5 of them. All right. And then the keyboard and notes on the instrument kind of thing, and bibliography. So we have the resources that I refer to in here. So this is the first book. And as I say, it is published and copyrighted. And I have, in addition to this, the reading book. So here's the reading book. I call it well, it's not really a reading book. It's a teacher's manual, because these kids aren't reading enough yet to have their own reading book yet. I have reading books for this level, but I just use them in my studio. I don't have them out for purchase. So this book is strictly for lessons. So if you want to have some kind of prompt, or you would like something that's already organized that you can look at and just follow the directions on, you have those in here. And I think, if I recall, there are 32 lessons in the teacher's manual. So Musical Binds 1, pre-instrumental, pre-twinkle levels. You can use a lot of this material, and it gives you suggestions for it if kids are already playing within the Suzuki literature. 1 Suzuki, like 1A. I don't think I go past perpetual motion. But you don't have to do that. It's just a suggestion if you want to build on what you've already done with them when they were not as advanced. So that is Musical Binds, Volume 1. Thank you.